Evening. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome you all to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 regular board meeting of September 12th, 2022. Would everyone please rise and join me in saying our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our participants for this evening, and starting at my far right is Miss Marianne Southwick, Clerk of the Board, Dr. Sean Hawker, our Superintendent. To my immediate left is Mr. Casey Morrisroe, Vice Chair, Miss Leslie Bierke, Board Member, Miss Heather Tenbrink, Board Member, Miss Allie Anderton, Board Member, and I'm Rebecca Smith, Chair of the Board. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of this meeting. Please sign in at the sheet provided at the entrance door. Comments may also be submitted to the board via trustees@cdaschools.org or in writing through our clerk. Thank you. Tonight we have a terrific opportunity to celebrate three of our tremendous local students. And so I'm going to have a chance here to come say a few words, so give me a second. All right. So each month, we as a board take time to recognize students and community members and organizations who do tremendous things in our community. And tonight is truly special as we pause to honor two current Lake City High School students and a recent Lake City High School graduate for helping save two younger teens at the risk of drowning in Lake Coeur d'Alene about a month ago. This event took place down at North Idaho College Beach on August 9th. Fortunately, several of our students sprang into action, pulled the two boys from the water, and began CPR on them until the medics arrived. And I'm happy to report that the boys that they helped to save have fully recovered. We have three of our local heroes here tonight, and so please join me up here, Lucy Mendez, Garrett Leonard, and Preston DeMar. Come on up. Lucy recently graduated from Lake City this past June and is now attending NIC. Garrett is a sophomore. Who's Garrett? Garrett, hi. Preston is a junior at Lake City. We also invited Lane Stidham, an NIC student who assisted as well in the rescue that day, and Lane was unavailable to join us this evening. First, though, I want to invite Sheriff Bob Norris and Coeur d'Alene Fire Chief Tom Grief, EMS Chief Scott Dietrich, and Fire Inspector Craig Etherton, and or whoever else in your crew would come up to celebrate as well, to join us up here for this special presentation. And I would love for you to start with your words as well.
Craig's going to present.
So Craig.
Perfect. Hi, guys. All right, so we'll just go through this plaque that we have for you here, and then the chiefs will hand you your plaques, and we'll go from there. On the afternoon of August 9th, 2022, Coeur d'Alene Fire Department was dispatched for multiple cardiac arrest victims at the North Idaho College Beach Dock. 3 victims were removed from the water, and 2 of the victims were unresponsive for an unknown amount of time. Bystanders who were at the beach enjoying the warm summer day sprung into action and helped by assisting with the removal of the 3 victims from the water and beginning CPR for the 2 unresponsive victims. Coeur d'Alene Fire Department units began to arrive and found 1 unconscious patient with a pulse at the end of the dock and 1 now conscious patient on the beach. Advanced life support skills were performed by Coeur d'Alene Fire personnel for the patient at the end of the dock as they prepared to transport the individual to Kootenai Health. The next arriving units took over care of the second unresponsive victim who had regained consciousness and transported him to Kootenai Health for further care as well. Therefore, in recognition of this achievement, this certificate is presented on behalf of the citizens of Coeur d'Alene, the Coeur d'Alene Fire Department, its officers and personnel. Thank you guys. Very well done. Congratulations.
Coeur d'Alene Fire Challenge Coin.
Well done. Governor Brad Little has also sent a letter as well, and so I want to read part of that. And so here's your letter as well, Preston, and Garrett. Let's get the top one, and Lucy. And from that letter, it says from the governor, your quick response is a true act of heroism and public service that shined a bright light on the Coeur d'Alene community. Not many your age would have the bravery or skill to act in such a situation. 2 young men are alive. Thank you to Garrett, Lane, Lucy, and Preston. We could not agree more on behalf of the Coeur d'Alene Board of Trustees, the Coeur d'Alene School District, and our entire community, and we thank you all for your quick and decisive action on August 9th. We also want to note, as a school board, that Preston, I think you said that you actually learned CPR back in 8th grade. All right. The Coeur d'Alene School District does provide students with CPR training in middle school, and in high school, they learn how to use AEDs. And now we have AEDs in our buildings as well. And so to show our appreciation, we have, because we knew you were going to get these great plaques, we actually got you waterproof Bluetooth speakers to celebrate. And so and thank you to all, as well, all of our first responders and our sheriffs and our fire departments for all you do for our community as well, and for being on the scene so rapidly as well. We really appreciate all of you. And once again, big round of applause for these guys. Thank you. I was so excited to do that I skipped approving our agenda. So we're going to approve that agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Terrific, thanks. I'm going to continue now just with our SPFL update and thank you. Do want to, hold on, I have notes here. Do want to take a moment just to thank everyone who turned out to vote last week in our SPFL levy vote. And especially just want to thank those from the community that had community endorsements and that took time to speak out in favor, especially of our levy, and took the time to do that. And so, let's see, it just disappeared. Especially the Coeur d'Alene Area Economic Development Corporation, the Coeur d'Alene Press, the Coeur d'Alene Regional Chamber Board, Geno Construction, North Idaho Builders, PAC, and many other individuals who took time to write letters to the press as well. So we will continue to work on that in the coming months and revisit that SPFL topic in our future board meetings, and continue to make strides towards safety and deferred maintenance. And so we're looking forward to that continued conversation. But thank you to everyone who turned out to vote last week. We appreciate that. So next up, we have our mentor program, and we're going to learn about what is going on in that area of our district. So, Dr. Nelson.
Good evening, Chair Smith, Superintendent Hawker, and members of the board. Welcome to a new school year. We're excited to be able to have you, and more importantly, to welcome our new faculty into our district as well. We are only as strong as the people who we put in front of our students. So it is important to know that about 15% of all of our instructional staff are within their first 3 years within our district. And to be able to make sure that they understand our ways of doing things and our expectations, and more importantly, the expectations of this community, we offer our students, or offer our staff, what is called a teacher induction program or a faculty induction program, because we do include counselors, psychologists, SLPs, and all of the support staff that we have in a certificated area. The word induction means powered on. It's an opportunity for us to be able to, again, bridge the gap between what our faculty know, the training and experiences that they've had in our own district, and also what we expect of them as part of this system. So it is also important to recognize that we have a teacher shortage in our country. And one of the most important things that we can do is to make sure that our teachers have a mentor, have somebody that they can rely upon in their hallways, in their grade levels, in their departments across town, who understand where they're at in that place. We have many staff who are singletons, teaching a single subject. Sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to find somebody to work with that, but we have good people in all areas throughout the district. And we recognize that statistically, 92% of our staff who have an established mentoring relationship, and that's a national figure, will continue on in this profession. So it is very, very important that we have that matched up along the way. What we have done is we've put together a program which has multiple components, bringing not only the people, but the experiences and the places together that we will have. Our induction program includes, for our first 2 years in the district, a 60-minute time of personal connection that is built into their day, whereby they can share emails, have a conversation, share an experience of something that they had in the classroom, talk about our instructional framework, talk about a particular need in professional learning, talk about the use of curricular materials. All of that time is built in. And in addition, in the evenings, 5 times a year, I think it says 6 on there, but it is 5, we provide a series of seminars that bring in our experts from our instructional core and our district cabinet to talk to them about rules and laws and special education and federal programs and services, how to best use the technology and supports that we have, and how they will be evaluated over the course of the year. Those relationships have already been established by the building principal. All of our staff right now have those mentoring relationships, and we've already started the work of connecting with them. In fact, in the communication that we sent out to our brand new teachers this last year, I simply put in a poll that said, how was your first week of classes? And I asked them to rate it on a 1 to 5 scale. And our overall average was a 4.2 out of 5. So things are going well. In addition to those supports where you have people who are regularly available for our staff, we also have embedded our instructional coaches. These are our instructional leaders throughout the district. And these folks are traversing in different content areas and working with staff in our elementary and secondary staffs to make sure, again, that they understand the expectations that are there. They can also dive a little deeper into some of the frameworks, into unpacking standards, into showing how to use a particular curricular support or an online resource as well. Overall, we have a very full program that we provide, and our mentors work side by side with our teams to make sure that they're providing assistance in anything that our new faculty member may need. Overall, my goal today was to be able to provide you a little bit of information as to what we have. We'd love to also invite you to any of the seminars that we have throughout the course of the year, because this is an established relationship that should be one for many, many years to come. May I answer any questions?
The 60 minutes of in-person contact time, when does that take place?
It could be during the school day if there's a common prep. It could be during a lunch. We see very creative use of time. A lot of what we will see is sometime during the school day. They'll check in here and there. But we do a log, so we want to make sure that there is that established relationship, and we check in regularly to make sure that that minimum is being met. I would say a majority of the time our staff are meeting much longer than that, especially at the start of the school year. There's a lot of rigmarole that happens to understand fully what we would like.
Okay, thanks.
How many mentors do we have throughout the district?
We have several mentors who are taking multiple mentees.
Okay.
I would want to look back, but of the 90 staff members who are in their first or second year within the program, I'd say a strong average would be somewhere around 60 to 70 mentees.
Oh,
I'd be more than glad to follow up with the
Okay.
exact number with you,
Great,
however.
I appreciate that.
My
Thanks.
pleasure, Ms. Trustee Berkey.
Dr. Nelson, I know I said no, but I'm going to ask one.
Oh.
Do the mentors get a stipend for that?
That is
Is that
correct.
part of the building, or the leadership stipends? or-
So an offset of our federal funding in Title II allows for teacher professional development. So our first year mentors receive a stipend, and our second year mentors, because the amount of time required is a little bit less, the second year mentors receive about half of the stipend that they had beforehand. But yes, there is a stipended relationship.
And that's from Title II funds?
Federal funds.
Federal funds, thank you.
Great. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. It is time for our public comment. I want to remind the public that while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It's a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items, and those wishing to address the board during this public comment period are limited to one comment not to exceed 3 minutes. At the designated time, you will be called to the podium. There is a microphone. Please state your name and city of residence. If you have additional comments that you would like to be presented to the board, you may provide those comments in writing to the clerk of the board, who will ensure that the board members receive this additional commentary. If you have handouts for the board, please give them to the clerk, who will disseminate them on your behalf. Please keep in mind that board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual's statement is too lengthy, personally directive, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. Thank you. We have a few folks who've come tonight to give public comment, and so I'd like to welcome this evening Tina Marie Busby, please.
Hi, I'm Tina Busby, and I live in Hayden. And I'm going to be reading because I'm trying to fit a bunch of stuff in. And if I don't read, who knows how long it'd take, and you'd say, no. Anyway, so I'm speaking about the sources of strength, and part of that program's I have to push it. Part of that program's stated curriculum components involve talking circles that are designed to promote equity, among other things. Every unit aligns with SEL, and if you visit the CASEL website, you will discover that SEL advances educational equity and addresses various forms of inequity. It states in part that inequities based on race, ethnicity, class, language, gender identity, sexual orientation, and other factors are deeply ingrained in the vast majority of these systems and impact students' and adults' social, emotional, and academic learning. The current definition of equity is unethical and racist. To tell a white passing child that they are somehow advantaged, regardless of their personal experiences, and to tell a black passing person that they can only elevate to the level of a white person if they're given extra help, regardless of their personal experiences, are equally racist. It's also against our laws. The Idaho statutes are designed to protect our children from this kind of abuse.
Title 33, Chapter 1, Section 33-138 states in pertinent part and paraphrased that no school district or public school shall teach, direct, or otherwise compel students to learn or adhere to any tenet claiming that any sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior. The statute and our Idaho Constitution also require that there's no distinction or classification of students made on account of race or color. These equity-based programs and curricula make educational assumptions based on non-educational factors that do not apply to everyone that they place in those categories. Page 8 of the Equity Framework states that achieving equity requires an understanding of the unique challenges and barriers faced by individual students or populations of students, and providing ongoing educational and social support to ensure that all students' needs are met. Populations of students absolutely categorizes the children into groups based on color and other generalizations in opposition to our Constitution and statutes. The very next paragraph says, research cites factors such as race, ethnicity, or national origin, language, and poverty.
And that's 3 minutes, so I'll need you to wrap up your
Okay,
thoughts.
I'm almost done. Play a role in disproportionate representation in special education as well as in specific special education categories. Placement in more restrictive learning environments and in exclusionary and punitive disciplinary actions. Adopting sources of strength rather than rejecting it, and eradicating the equity framework and any other program or curricula that contains SEL or equity should
you to wrap it
trigger
up.
an investigation and perhaps even charges if it goes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Busby. Christina Peterson?
Hi, I'm Christina Peterson. I'm also from Hayden. I have 2 elementary school aged boys, though, in the district and a toddler who will one day join them. The purpose of public education is to give basic knowledge to the children and support them in becoming contributing members of society. It was to be nonpartisan and free. I freely and fully support our teachers in doing that. What I don't support is spending so much time and money on trying to make our little kids woke with programs like Sources of Strength when they have no time or effort or money left to teach them things like English, math, science, and history that our tax dollars are supposed to actually be paying for. School is supposed to be a safe place of learning, and I don't see how that can be true for elementary age kids while learning about suicide and drug abuse instead of school subjects. We're told that the Sources of Strength seeks to prevent suicide, but why are we putting these ideas in their heads in the first place? If these issues are a problem for a specific child, then a licensed professional should be sought to help with the consent of the parents. I do not consent to intentionally bringing up the idea of or making children aware of grown-up problems and situations, especially by unlicensed and minimally trained individuals. Despite the fact that the Sources of Strength program already exists in Idaho at a high school level, the suicide rates among those youths continues to rise. If something is supposed to be helping but is in fact possibly causing the opposite effect, why would we even consider adopting it at an even younger age level? Why is the school district trying to broaden their involvement with our children into the mental health arena without even seeking to use licensed individuals who are extensively educated in prepubescent child development? Sources of Strength must be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Conrad Woodall?
I have to apologize. I'm going to read really quickly to get this data in 3 minutes. So my name's Conrad Woodall. I'm from Rathdrum. I'm the Director of Parents' Rights and Education in North Idaho. I have a master's degree in forensic psychology. The topic is your upcoming decision on Sources of Strength. The problem is the evidence-based support for this program is not there. The conclusions of the 2010 study, if you actually read the study and go to the bottom, quote, It remains for future studies to test whether positive intervention effects on school-wide norms from sources of strength translate over a longer time period into positive behavior changes and reduce suicidal behavior. In other words, it's a suicide prevention program that doesn't know if it actually reduces suicide. What does research about bias and research tell us? March 2008, published research, British Medical Journal, entitled "Why Promote the Findings of Single Research Studies?" Quote, "Increasingly, it is accepted that decisions should not be based on the findings from single primary studies, but rather informed by actionable messages derived from synthesized evidence based on systematic reviews." The studies used by Sources of Strength are these single primary studies. What is a systematic review? It's a summary of the literature that synthesizes the results of multiple primary studies by using strategies that reduce biases and random errors. What does the scientific method say about findings? They need to be replicated. February 2022, a research paper entitled "The Sources of Strength Australia Project," published in the Journal of Affective Disorders. Conclusions, quote, "Although the Sources of Strength program may have increased awareness of help seeking, there is no evidence that it is effective in increasing help seeking intentions or behaviors in this cohort." Now, that's called cherry picking in research, because if you look at their website, ironically, this study isn't on there because it contradicts their other studies. Okay? Another claim to fame of the Sources of Strength program. Quote, "Sources of Strength is the first suicide prevention program involving peer leaders." That's great, but this approach isn't new. It was already tried with bullying programs, which is important because bullying is strongly linked to youth suicide. Review of bullying programs, which was a systematic review, published in Child Development Perspectives, a journal of the Society for Research in Child Development 2020. Two of the recommendations from this review. First, schools should avoid using strategies that boost peer visibility of victimization. Examples are identifying a victim in a class. In other words, getting these group meetings that you're talking about. This study in bullying, using the same approach, recommended you don't do it. Second thing, quote, "Programs that enlist fellow students to intervene or help support the victim can lead to an increase in bullying and make it worse for the victims." So what happens if you increase suicide or you make it worse for those struggling? This is not an evidence-based program, it's an experiment. Lakeland voted it down, so should you.
Thank you. Is it Woodall? Yes. Woodall, thank you. Mr. Paulson, Josh Paulson?
Well, I am a little underprepared today because I wasn't planning on speaking. We're new to the school district. We have a second grader at Dalton. And this last week, she came home and told us that although we filled out the opt-out form last year, that they fingerprinted all of the kids for their lunches. And that's something that we tried to opt out of. And we called our principal, and she apologized and didn't really know why June was that they tried to fingerprint her. We're not trying to stir up problems or make a big deal. I just feel like it's with the way things have been going the last couple of years, we just want to know that we're being respected in things that we do or don't want our kids to be a part of. And so although this might be something really, really small or might not seem important to you, to me it seems like it's something that could be shrugged off, but to me it feels like an invasion of privacy a little bit with our kid. And we're already us, and then we talked to, it happened at 3 different schools. It happened at Atlas as well, around the same time. And then my brother is his daughter is a kindergarten, and they filled out the opt-out form when they registered his daughter, and they went and asked her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, they did it today." And so for me, it just seems like, why even fill out an opt-out form if it's just going to get trashed? And is this just the first thing? I know it's not a very severe thing, but obviously we've been through a lot the last couple of years, so it could be, You know, do we just line them all up and teach them about something that we don't condone, or something that they're talking about without bringing it forward, you know, or letting us know, or shooting out an email, hey, we had a glitch in the system, we can't find out which kids opted out for this, let's wait and do it, and then have everyone else fill out another form. But they just went for it, and she had no way to say why it happened or what. No answer, just an apology. So to me, that you know, half of me just wants to yank our kids out of the school because I don't feel like I can trust that our wishes will be respected. And we're already on the verge of doing that. And then when you talk to, we don't know a lot of people around here. We're relatively new to the area for a good reason. Then you talk to a few other people and the same thing happened. So it was the whole school district. It wasn't just a mistake at our one school. So, I don't know. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Trustee
Josh,
Marshall.
can I just ask a question real quick? I'm familiar with it because I have kiddos in the district too. You said you filled out an opt-out form. Was that, you said last year, but you did one this year as well? Is that correct? Or it was when you registered? Or
We registered, she went to first grade for 6 weeks of last year. We did fill one out. This year when we re-registered, my wife re-registered her, there wasn't an option to fill one out.
Okay.
So I guess we were assuming that we would be able to maintain the same thing as far as, you know, our daughters, they do have minor food allergies, but we also just want to have a hand in what they eat every day, and their diet's important to us.
Right. Okay.
And like I said, that's just, feels like it can snowball into other more
Right.
serious things in my brain. That's what
Sure.
I feel right away.
Right. Okay. I was trying to think, doing my kids, I did my kids' online stuff this year, and there's so many boxes you're checking and sheets you're going through. I can't remember if that was in there or not on the online. I don't remember it, but.
Yeah, Mrs. Hildebrand, she asked me, was it online? And I said, no, it wasn't
Okay.
online. So because she did the same thing for
Right.
her kids, she's like, I don't remember.
Right.
So it was missed, but
Okay.
we filled it out. There were several other people that filled
Sure.
it out last year on a paper form. So I
Right.
don't know if they do, some people register via paper or online. I think it may be because we were new that we did some paper stuff, maybe. I don't know. But
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure our team will be in contact. Thank you. Ryan and Jennifer DeMar. I think they were just here to celebrate their heroic son, which is what they says the topic of discussion is. So I think they're already gone. So again, thank you to those students. All right, this concludes public comment this evening. Thank you for taking the time. Next up, we have our consent agenda, and
Yes. I would like to make a motion to pull J from this section, please.
great.
So
That's
I'll second that. Should I make a motion to approve the consent agenda except for item J?
yeah. Could you? Thank you. And then say A through I.
Oh, sorry. I'll make a motion to pull J, and then we can keep A through I.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And so did that approve that whole consent agenda? Did we do that? Okay.
Can we just real quick discuss J?
Yeah. And then we'll come back here to J. And
I guess I would just like some clarification. I think I know what that's about because we had some memos in there. So, Ms. Bierke, could you just explain kind of your thoughts
there
on
are
item
some-
J?
So the way the policy is written, I'm kind of working on adding some language that is more specific to the case that was cited by both our attorney and the ISB lady. I don't know her title. So, yeah, so I'll bring that to Dr. Hawker this week.
it still leaves that policy is still in place. So we do still have a policy because we approved last month that policy with whatever the recommendation essentially was of our attorneys. And so basically it just doesn't approve this new version. So we still have a way for people to make concerns and to lift up concerns and everything. And then sometime in the future, when it's ready and when the work is ready and when that policy is ready, we'll bring it back to the board for future discussion. So is that
So I think because I think I made the motion, we approved the policy striking that one line. If it was legally allowed, the opinion is kind of that it isn't, or it's maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So for the meantime, it's in there, that one sentence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's remained. Ms. Bierke, you're working on
Yes.
an edit.
Yes.
All right.
great?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. We've got board consent, additional information. Is there any questions on those? Do you want us to take any of those individually at this point? Or
No, certainly that's just your, that's kind of your goofy titled area where it's really board information, but we have some policies that kind of refer to that board information as also board consent information. So we've left that same title there. But there's nothing to vote on in there. It's just board information. But we'd be happy to entertain any questions about any of those three items if anybody has any.
we have contracted services in there, the summary, which is just the general summary of administrative procedures, and then our continuous improvement plan, which is due at the beginning of October. So October 1. So any questions on that, on any of those three items from the board?
And the continuous improvement plan is on our agenda next week, is that correct?
That's correct. We plan to do more of a formal presentation to the board at the workshop. Again, that's not an item that has to formally be approved. We can submit it as a draft as well. It just has to be sent to the state by October 1.
Thank you. And then next up, we have consideration of action items. We have a bid summary for copy paper, and is Mr. Voller gonna present on that, or do we just need to?
If you'd like to, certainly.
Just approve what is here.
Generally, I think parliamentary procedures would ask for a motion and a second, and then discussion, and then. But you can certainly deviate from that process if you'd like.
Are there any questions on this?
I would love some more information on the Solution Tree contract.
Great. Well,
And I did
we'll
have
get to that
one
one
question
next.
that- sorry,
That'll
I'm
be
skipping.
nope. That'll be next.
Sorry.
We do need to look at just copy paper first. So, is there any questions for Mr. Voller on that? Otherwise, I will just take a. There is a.
So, go ahead.
I just had a question. I guess I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. I don't know if Mr. Voller's the one I'm directing. that
He'd
to,
be
but-
happy to address it.
So this is our annual paper contract district-wide. Looks like the number of participating bidders was lower than normal. And then one was not in compliance, I think, right?
Typically in the past, there's been 3 bidders. This year we had 2 bidders. Technically, both bidders were unresponsive because neither could meet the terms of delivery. So that makes them unresponsive. But the one thing we learned through that bid process is the Office Depot, there's an acronym and that they're under the 3-letter acronym. I can't remember what it was. On that,
NABSO.
but
I think it says,
yeah,
right?
is
NABSO.
part of the NASPO, which is a purchasing cooperative that is approved by the state of Idaho. So we can actually purchase through the cooperative. So what we would do is probably negotiate with them directly, not do this through a bid process, negotiate that directly through the negotiated state bid, and then bring that back to you as a board for approval through that process.
Great.
So at this point, we would want a motion to reject both
Yes,
bids.
correct. That's what the
Okay.
recommendation is.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to reject both of the copy paper bids presented as unresponsive and allow administration to negotiate directly through NASPO Purchasing Cooperative and bring a recommendation.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? No, hearing none. Thanks, Jeff, for digging deeper into that. It seems like it might be good for us in the long run. So, thanks. Solution Tree contract then. Dr. Hawker, would you like to start on that?
Well, sure. It sounds like we may have some questions on that item as well, so I'd love to hear those, and then we can certainly address that. This is your Solution Tree PLC summit that is being planned for next year. Basically, like the first 3 or 4 days of the school year for our teachers, we would spend 2.5 days bringing Solution Tree to us to help alleviate costs of travel and all the costs of off-site training, and also be able to sell the remaining seats to surrounding school districts, surrounding districts in other states. Whoever would like to buy, there'll be about 350 extra seats that Solution Tree will be able to sell at I think $750 a ticket or something, and those get credited to our account. So, an avenue for us to potentially offset our costs by a couple $100,000.
Could you speak to it being funded by the ESSER $3?
That's exactly correct. The funding for this, we have really tried to figure out, what's the best avenue to do this. So we will use ESSER learning loss funds, which are again expiring here in the very near future. So we'll be able to use that as we presented previously in the I think it was a month or two ago about this contract. We would have annual expenses of this in this contract year of around $90,000, $89,000, I think it is, that would come out of this fiscal year, because obviously July 1 starts a new fiscal year for you, and then the remaining expenses would come out of your next year's budget as well. So, but we needed to identify where those funds would come from, and those are planned to be coming from the learning loss dollars.
And at some point, I think on our workshop coming up, we're going to talk more about PLCs in general and why that's important for the district moving forward. And so, is that correct?
Yes. Thanks, Madam Chair. We will absolutely be doing that in a workshop where we will tie this fundamental professional learning community process into the overall High Reliable Schools focus that we have, gluing everything together. And we'll do that in an upcoming workshop.
And the number that's in our packet for the full contract cost does not reflect any seats sold to anyone else, correct? That's before any credit.
That's correct.
Okay.
So my question is, why this company? I looked online and I didn't find a ton of stuff about them. I mean, I found their webpage, but why this company over some other company?
I think that's a fair question. Solution Tree is founded. They basically are the program, if you will, the company that began PLCs and the professional learning communities, and so I would say they're your foremost authority in how to help us help our teachers build upon their profession, work collaboratively as teams. Rick Dufour is really the founder of those PLC thought processes. And so they're really just the best, and we've been fortunate enough, they generally, you usually can't get them to come to you. You usually have to go somewhere else to participate in these trainings. Their primary largest summit that they call it is in Phoenix, Arizona every year. So obviously there's not only the $750 that you would pay to go to the training, you would have hotels and airfare and all the additional costs to do that. But we've been able to, we started working with them a long time ago. Dr. Nelson has been instrumental in working through this contract to get them to come out and even give us a look. They have come and toured our facilities to see if we could house enough seats for them to bring all of their experts to us. And it looks like Lake City High School will be able to host about 950 paying teachers to come to this training. And now we'll be able to provide that opportunity so that all of our teachers get a opportunity, a training, all at the same time, and all an understanding of the importance of working collaboratively for the benefit of our students. So we're very excited about this, and if we're able, which we're very confident, if we're able to sell those 350 additional seats, we will drastically offset our costs even more. And so really excited about that as well. I can't tell you when the last time a Solution Tree Institute or Summit went unsold out. Every time they sell out very far in advance in everything I've ever looked at. So I'm very excited. I think they just recognize Coeur d'Alene's a great place to host a a training like this, and that they'll be able to get people from potentially all over the country, but we're hoping to at least open the doors to our neighboring districts, and anybody that would like to attend, the first 350 that sign up would be able to take advantage of that next year.
Okay, so just to reiterate, there's a total cost for the program. We're hoping to offset that, hopefully close to half, it looks like. And then the additional yearly cost is going to be for how many years? You said, or there is no additional?
Correct. This is just the cost to bring in the training for next year. So what you have to do is you have to have a small payment this year in advance so that they can kind of book all their airfare and commit their speakers to come, and they will send some materials, in the mail over the summer and get ready for the conference, all of those things. They do that leading up to July, and then the big expense comes, I believe Shannon was able to negotiate that to be paid a little bit after the actual date of the conference, after everybody's all come, they're all done, and then they would get their final payment.
And the purpose of this conference is to get our school ready for the High Reliable School PLC model.
That is correct.
There's nothing else involved in this.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Dr. Hawker, could you, I know the five of us have had an opportunity to speak individually with you on PLCs. Could you give like a 2-minute what's PLCs, just for anyone maybe sitting in the audience or watching at home in their PJs, kind of what we're talking about?
You bet. Well, PLC in a nutshell stands for Professional Learning Community, and so it's an avenue for our teachers to work collectively together in strategic ways, and that's really as simple as it is. Oftentimes, especially at the secondary level, you'll get teachers that they're experts in their content, and so they work very independently. Not to say they close the doors and ask to be left alone, but they're very good with what they do, and you may only have a couple of AP chemistry teachers or some of those kinds of subjects. The professional learning community creates collaboration amongst grade levels. It creates collaboration across the entire district. It's an opportunity for us to collaborate, and that happens to be in a high reliable school system, which gives us the best chances for improved achievement and sustainable student achievement. That level 1 high reliable school function that we'll learn more about in our next workshop is all based on a safe and collaborative environment. We need to make sure our teachers feel comfortable with sharing out data from their own classroom. Hey, why did your kids score awesome? Why did mine maybe score a little less than awesome? What are you doing that maybe I could do a little bit better? It's that collaboration, opportunity piece that professionals understand how to do that. We're wanting to bring that together as a glue and have a specific focus on that collaboration piece so that we have a district that is functioning all on the same cylinder, if you will. And as you know, in our curriculum audits that we've had in the last 10 plus years, in our latest curriculum audit, they coined the term that we're a pretty darn good district of schools, but maybe not so much together as a school district. Not enough collaboration, I guess, amongst all of the buildings. This will give us that foundation so that we're all talking the same lingo. We're all understanding those essentials that are a component for professional learning community. So it's really very student focused, student driven. So that was a lot more than an elevator speech of PLC, and certainly could go into a lot more than that. But I'll stop there.
Okay, well,
Workshop is
just
coming.
So that people know too, talk about how, I hate to say test scores, but how achievement levels are benefited from this program.
Okay, yes.
Kind of touched on it.
I would expect that question, especially. So as I know as well, our journey, our glove, if you will, that's going to put everything together is bring everything under the auspices of a high reliable school system. And there's components within that system. And there's at least 3 or 4 certifications that take about a year apiece that will really help us. that when you get to that point, when you have gone through at least level 3 of a high reliable school system, every school that's ever done that has seen marketable improvements in academic performance. It's not just a little needle tick. It's like, okay, our kids have really gone from good to great. They're really doing good things. We need to get to that level. The foundation of that level requires professional learning communities to be in place and operating with fidelity. And although we have pockets in the district doing great things, we have too many pockets that are not PLCing with fidelity. And so we really need to have that focus on PLC in place first. So that's what we've decided, that next year will be our focus on professional learning communities. And then once that foundation has been set, some of our schools will already be marching forward with High Reliable Schools Level 1 certification, perhaps even by the end of this year. We're not going to hold anybody back, but our focus would be next year that the vast majority of our schools achieve that certification. And then within 3 years, we should be seeing some significant improvements in everything that we do.
And this is not a new thing. This is actually part of work that has been being done over the last few years. Some of our faculty are already trained in this and doing this already, correct?
That is correct.
Any additional questions?
I think the only, it's not a question, but a comment I would say is I see this as a tremendous opportunity for our district to do training in-house here with a great deal of savings when it comes to travel. And if you look at training we've done over the years, it's very expensive. The travel is the expensive part of it. And by being able to open it up and offset the costs even more, assuming that happens, we're talking savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars of what we've done historically. And even without, it's, I think, a savings of what we've done historically. So.
And if I could add, I think the benefit that we have too is that this is coming from some one-time ESSER learning loss funds that expire, and that we have a deadline to use. And so I think it's a very good avenue for us to utilize those dollars.
I'll motion to approve the Solution Tree contract as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Shannon, if you wouldn't mind coming up, thank you.
All right, good evening, trustees. Tonight I am presenting an update on our unaudited actuals. These are our actuals as of June 30th prior to being audited. We are currently going through our audit right now with our independent auditors. So at November, they'll come here, present our audited actuals. So hence, unaudited actuals. So there are a couple large variances between what our FY22 adopted was and what our FY22 actuals were. So I'm going to go through those. I'm going to go through them as categories when we look at revenues, expenditures, fund balance, and we'll talk about those. But definitely the big factors that explain our variances are one-time COVID funding, that temporary State Board of Education ruling, switching from ADA to enrollment-based funding, additional investments by the state to make sure that there wasn't going to be a public education stabilization fund freeze. And then I'll go over an adjustment to our beginning fund balance as of 7/1/2021 due to some Medicaid compliance cleanup. Okay, so taking a look at revenues first, I split it into our big categories. Local sources, so that's all our property taxes and other miscellaneous like donations, some sale of equipment. Our state revenue, so our big foundation payment plus all those specialized categorical state revenues. Federal revenue, which was budgeted, AKA ESSER, and then transfers in what we get from indirect costs. So just looking at budget versus unaudited actuals, there are some pretty big differences. This first big difference is our state revenue. And that difference is because we went from ADA to enrollment-based funding. Second big difference is federal revenue. Based off of reporting requirements for federal funds, they cannot be in our general fund, just some basic governmental accounting. So although we reflected it in our budget, we have to account for federal funds in special revenue funds. So ESSER 2, ESSER 3, ESSER 1 all had their specialized revenues or funds. All right, and so when we look at that huge increase in state revenue, mostly one-time increases, and that decrease taking that federal revenue out of the general fund, we get to a difference of about 1.3 million that we are still under for revenues. All right, and then just a deeper look into our July 15th foundation payment. So that last foundation payment, we see our original budget was about 57 million. It included a 1.2 million projected loss from the PISA freeze. And so when we were working through our budget subcommittee and at adopted budget for fiscal year 23, we knew that the state did their ruling on enrollment-based funding. We knew that there wasn't going to be a PISA freeze or a very small freeze that might be. So we knew that we were going to get definitely more in our foundation payment, about 59.3 million. And now with closing the books, it's about 59.4 million. So not too off from estimated actuals, but you'll see that large variance because of enrollment funding, no PISA freeze, and then also just a small increase in transportation reimbursement. That's just based off of actuals from the prior year of reimbursement for expenses.
Shannon,
Yeah.
the reason this doesn't tie to that previous slide where it was a 2996 is because this is just one of the payments. Is that correct?
So this is just the foundation payment, but we also have all those special categorical ones too.
Thank you.
In your board packet, you'll see a couple more notes of why there's the differences. So just for reference, if you want to look a little deeper into each line item. Okay, now we're going to take a look at expenditures. We're going to first take a look at the total expenditures as a whole and then separate salaries and benefits because that's the main reason for our expenditure variance. So this will look super similar, just kind of a condensed version of what you usually see in your board packet, separating by expenditures out by instructional, support services, and transfers out. You'll see our budget. We had about 83.7 million budgeted for expenditures. Now this included all the general fund salaries. It included, we were planning on using ESSER to offset for those general fund salaries to offset our deficit. Well, those expenditures are included in there because at the time of adoption, we thought we would have our ESSER funds in the general fund. So just keep that in mind. It gets a little complicated. Now our unaudited actuals, we knew that we couldn't so we are going to transfer general fund salaries into ESSER to offset our deficit. Well, we couldn't actually keep those salaries in the general fund, so we transferred them to those ESSER special revenue funds, so it's not included in that general fund actuals. So you'll see a huge different variances in the budget expenditures versus actual expenditures, about 7 million. However, when you add back those general fund salaries charged to ESSER, we had $5.6 million, 5.8 million of general fund salaries charged to ESSER. You'll see that the variance between budget and actuals are more like 1.2 million. I think the next slide will make it a little more easier to understand.
Can I know what you're saying, I think, but I just want to verify. So when we adopted the budget a year ago,
Yep.
or 13, 14 months ago, when you weren't our finance officer, the plan at that time was we were keeping all salaries in the general fund and we were moving ESSER dollars into the general fund to balance.
Correct.
You've come in board, said, no, that's really not the way we should do it. We should keep those in ESSER funds. So we took the revenue, the ESSER revenue out and kept it in its own fund. And we've moved those associated expenses that we were going to pay for out of the general fund over to the ESSER fund.
You got it, correct, yeah. And as of that time, around that May timeline, the state and the auditors weren't quite sure where we should have been putting those dollars. If you remember the first round, just the COVID funding, they were put in our general fund. So there was a lot of wish-washy guidance, and then finally the state and the auditors made a final ruling. Those need to be in the special revenue funds. So that's why there's so much complication with general fund first, then ESSER. So it kind of, you'll see probably across a lot of districts, they were given that kind of guidance. And just remember at adopted budget, we were projecting about a $4 million deficit. And then after that, after negotiations and further PSIF talks, we were thinking maybe even to the $6 million deficit. So that explains why that 5.7 of general fund salaries were transferred over to ESSER. I'm hoping this slide will be a little more easier to understand. So this is just salary and benefits. You'll see our salary and benefit budget. So that included all salaries, including those general fund salaries that were later transferred to ESSER. And then B is our actuals, so not including those ESSER salaries. So you'll see that difference is almost $7 million. But then we add back those salaries right here, and our net difference after ESSER is about 1.2, which is pretty comparable to our total difference for total expenditures, including materials, non-personnel costs. And then at that, you'll kind of see that our budget accuracy goes from 92%, which isn't great, to then 98.57%, which is pretty decent. Any questions on that? Also, for later reference, I've included a little cheat sheet formula to add back to it. Okay, so our last discussion is fund balance. So we started the general fund balance at about 4.5 million. So that was last year's ending, 21-22's beginning. Then going through closing the books, kind of discovered that, hey, there's a beginning fund balance in the Medicaid fund balance. That's one of our special education revenue sources. Well, there's not supposed to be ever a fund balance because of special education requirements for how you spend your revenue. There's a certain order. The first order being state and local revenues that match or are more than what you spent in your state and local revenues last year. So that's rule number one. Then it's Medicaid. You got to use all those revenues first. Then you can tap into your special education IDEA federal funding. That's the order, that's the compliance rules. Knowing that, because we had a fund balance, that means we weren't spending Medicaid in that order, because we should never have Medicaid funds, because we use all our special education IDEA federal dollars, which means throughout, it was a course over over a decade, that our general fund dollars, we actually were spending more in our state and local general fund dollars to offset what we were kind of saving in Medicaid, if that makes sense. So we looked through 10 years of Medicaid and special education MOE, corrected all of the order, and we're all in compliance now. But now we kind of owe back the general fund, because the general fund covered more costs than it should. It covered costs that Medicaid should. So there's adjustment to our beginning fund balance to net out the Medicaid fund from last year, revenues equals expenditures, and giving back the general fund what it was kind of over-contributing to. Does that make sense? Okay. So there was a pretty big beginning fund balance in Medicaid of 1.8 million.
Shannon.
Yep.
Sorry. So we spent more out of our general fund than we should have for special education over a period of years.
Over a decade, yeah. It's not just pinpointing one exact month or one exact year. In the past 2 years, it's been pretty good. So yeah, it's just accumulating.
So this adjustment is sort of paying the general fund back the money that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And from an ongoing basis, including this fiscal year 23 adopted budget and Medicaid revenues equal expenditures. So everything is right with the world in Medicaid.
Sorry. So just in really layman's, this stuff makes my eyes glaze over. So that's why we have extra money. We found money because we had been overpaying the general fund instead of utilizing the Medicaid
Correct.
dollars. Was that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so that's where that money came from.
That's where this
'cause I've
big
been
adjustment
getting
will
a
come
lot
from.
of questions about where did this come from, so I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I can explain it.
Yep. So that is one part of our puzzle of our surplus.
Okay.
Okay. So
Hold on real quick.
yeah.
Shannon's being super modest here, and I'm going to probably maybe embarrass her, but this is something that, she came from another state and she saw this and was like, what the heck? And kind of started questioning it. And my understanding from Dr. Hucker, found out that the state's guidance, there was a change in federal law a number of years ago. The state's guidance never changed. And the larger auditing firms didn't change their guidance either. So Shannon kind of discovered it, asked those people about it, and I think they've corrected their recommendations. And there's lots of school districts now that are having to do this, but Shannon found this, so.
No. No, we have there's an excellent, her name's Lisa at the state, and she's like on top of her compliance. So, just a couple years ago, some iffy guidance. And these are federal funds. They are not state funds. So, yep.
Shannon, really quick, and thank you for all of that. Do you, off the top of your head, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and if you don't know it, do you remember what our beginning fund balance was in 2019 before COVID hit?
I don't, but our next slides, hold on one sec, I can answer that. 2019, we had 5 million at the end of 19, and then so right when COVID hit, closing those books, it went to 6.4 million.
6.4
at June 30th, 2020, so right after COVID effects.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now we start with an adjusted beginning fund balance. You'll see that on the audit report. And then we take our fund balance plus our revenues for the year minus our expenditures, and that gets us our year's surplus, or if it was in the negative, a deficit. When you do that, so our surplus revenues minus expenditures is 5.7 million, so pretty big. And that's just our current year surplus. So that is explained by 4 major things. So I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. Those general fund salaries charged to ESSER, we took those out of the general fund, so that increases our surplus. However, that federal revenue that we had to take out of the general fund, that decreases our surplus. Then you add back $3 million in state revenue. That includes a little bit of increases in local revenue, but for the most part, that's the big state revenue from one-time enrollment-based funding, plus no PISA freeze. And we had budgeted about $1.2 million for a PISA freeze. And then the remaining can be explained by really, you saw in expenditures, we had about, after netting the ESSER, we were under budget about 1.2 million. That's because of savings and vacancies, right sizing. When we adopted this budget, it was based off of 2020 personnel costs. So as we really saw that we were going into this huge deficit, and over a course of a year and a half to 2, we've been able to right size more. And then also with the supply shortages, no travel, there was still, our sub shortages, we couldn't do a lot of PD and travel, just savings from that one-time savings, and our department and buildings maybe couldn't spend all of their budgets. So that gets our surplus. So 4 big things. So we add our surplus plus our adjusted beginning fund balance. We are at an ending fund balance for the year of almost 12 million. Looking at a 10-year trend, that's pretty big for us. Just from FY13 was at our highest of within the past decade of 7 million. So here we are today. And also FY21 corrected that to reflect Medicaid.
This may not have anything to do with anything, but does any of this money, is that part of our reserve fund?
That's our reserves then, or the contingency reserve.
Yes. So we are required to have a 5%-ish,
Right.
roughly?
Yep. I'll show that to you in a couple
So
slides. It's
that's
about 4 million.
In this number.
That is included in that number.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now that we had our fund balance discussion, we are going to talk about residual equity transfers. You may ask, what is a residual equity transfer? Just if you look at your board policy 7215, it's very dry, but it's about GASB 54, which is pretty much the principles around how we categorize all our ending fund balances and what we essentially can do with those fund balances. So really a residual equity transfer is just a transfer from one fund balance in the general fund or any other fund to another fund. There are some rules and there are some reasons why we do it. One reason being a compliance requirement. The general fund is supposed to pay for FICA and Medicare for child nutrition. So thus, at each year, we transfer general funds to child nutrition fund to cover those costs. Same with state bus depreciation. The state gives us some money for buying buses. They give that to us in the general fund. We transfer it to the bus depreciation fund. There's also some reasons why we do it is also local board decisions. With our supplemental levy, we decided to earmark $600K annually for buses because that state depreciation for years and years either wasn't being used or wasn't enough to be able to afford the buses that we needed. So those are local board decisions. Also, there's for balancing funds. Say one fund had excess expenditures over revenues. It's in the hole, the negative. The general fund can contribute. In board policy, it does state that anything over 100K the board needs to approve of that. And usually with these residual equity transfers, they are, when we adopt our budget, we adopt those as well. And if there's any variances or any new ones, then we present them. And here's just a report of our current residual equity transfers. They've all been pretty much in the adopted budget. There's a $3,000, a $4,000 one that probably wasn't planned for, but that's just, making funds whole. But you'll see our big bus depreciation one annually, our levy, for buses, and you'll see the almost 100K for FICA and Medicare for child nutrition. So those are what make up our transfers from the general fund to other funds. Now, we do need to talk about that surplus and where we're at with our ending fund balance. Biggest we've had in quite some time. If I don't know, haven't gone back more than 15 years, but probably the biggest ever. That surplus is due to one-time savings from COVID. They are not ongoing costs. So if they're not ongoing revenues, so we can't fund ongoing costs to them. That wouldn't be fiscally responsible. So the next item in your board packet is a board resolution. What we're doing is the district is recommending a $5 million transfer from the general fund to the plant facilities fund. Also recommending we commit this for major deferred maintenance, safety and security expenditures, and future construction projects, including property development. Really committing those funds, it really addresses those critical needs where we are underfunded right now. We don't have a revenue stream other than state lottery that covers a portion of our current salaries for any of these projects. I want to talk, we talked about what a transfer means. What a committed fund balance means is that it's a former board recognition that those funds need to be used for those reasons. At any time, the board can do a subsequent resolution to either revise the amount that was committed, get rid of that commitment altogether, or even transfer it to another fund for a different purpose that the board would like to. But at this time, with those critical facility needs, this is what we're recommending, and we're recommending to commit it. So if the board does approve of that transfer and commitment, I wanted to show you what our ending fund balance would look like. We have $12 million right now. With a $5 million transfer, we would be at about $7 million. 1 month of payroll is about $6 million, just for reference. Here's a couple other references. Our required contingency reserve is for this year, not this year, fiscal year 22. I'm in 2 different fiscal years right now. $4 million, that is included in that $7 million. What this $7 million also represents is about 8.5% of all general fund revenues, about 9% of the fiscal year 22 general fund expenditures plus transfers, or about 8.44% if you include ESSER payroll. So those are kind of what this $7 million really means to us. 1 month of payroll of $6 million, it's not a lot. So just to give you a reference, what that means for our big picture. $7 million sounds big, but in the scheme of things, when you think about payroll, it's not as big as it may seem. It's huge on a personal level, but we're a $85 million general fund budget. So I will take any questions and answers, and then I'll also be up here for questions and answers for the resolution.
I guess my first question is, I know we're recommended at the 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, and that's baseline what we have to have by policy. Is there a better percentage to seek for? I would, in case of catastrophe, all those kinds of pieces.
Right.
1 month is 1 month.
So in board policy 7215, really it's kind of great. It highlights if the ending balance exceeds 16%, then it recommends that the board identify those one-time funds or one-time investments. I'm a finance director. I'm going to be conservative with the finances. I would recommend at least 2 months of payroll if we could. But given our huge needs for facilities, I think it's the time to act. And I really hope when we get down to that, we only have 2 months of payroll left or 1 month of payroll and we can't meet those. We have far, far more issues to deal with. And I would say at the event a supplemental levy doesn't pass, that would be an issue.
Okay. And my follow-up, I think, is probably maybe for Dr. Hawker. Were we to move these funds into the deferred maintenance and safety, is it possible to get more of a specific, list from you of what that money is being spent on, that type of thing? That's something I just have heard in the last couple of weeks, as we went into the SPFL, is just the need for, tell me more specifically where these funds went. So.
Yes, I would say too, none of those expenditures would ever occur without presenting them to the board anyway. What we have recognized, and with this resolution, is that the future is unknown, obviously, for us. One of the big conversations that we're having is we are continuing to grow as a school district, and we may be ahead of development from a contractor's perspective with some of the property that a school might go on. And you may be, as a board, asked to front some of those development costs in order to get that to occur. And of course, we already are $25 million behind in deferred maintenance, scenarios. So we feel like putting this in a facility function makes great sense. And as Shannon has shared with you, you can always move it and do something different with it if you so choose at a later date. But for now, it would just clean up the books, move it out of the general fund, target it for something associated with facilities or, again, property development, any of those kinds of avenues, and put it in a place that makes sense for one-time expenditures. It's really just that shuffling of those ESSER dollars that we had we have had the right guidance in years past, it'd already be done.
And I didn't hear you say safety, but safety could be a definite emphasis of that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Other questions?
Well, kind of in line with what you said, I would like to see what that money is being projected to be spent on. So the 5 million is going to go towards, because I know our community wants to know where that money is going to go. What projects are we going to tackle with that? Because I know we have some big needs. So is that something we can find out?
Yes, it's something we can certainly work on. I mean, we're obviously not prepared today to say exactly what we would do, with those funds, because also, again, with overall timing, we'll work through all of that. So, and everything will come before the board for, obviously anything over $50,000 comes to the board for approval anyway. So, we would plan to do that, obviously, as well.
So when it comes to us, the pieces of this, could we specify that this is from that fund, that money we set aside? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, just so then our community sees, like, well, we set aside the 5 million, and this is one of the projects we're using it for.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be very transparent of where that fund, the funding source comes from, similar to when we have bond expenditures and have to be very transparent about those projects and bonds, similar.
Additional questions? Trustee Morrisroe?
I would just say I think it's an appropriate use of the funds. I know you all haven't been through an auditor's report yet, but we're going to get one here in about 2 months, I'd say, November usually. And if we ask the question, what would they recommend? They're going to tell you 3 months probably, which for us is 18 million-ish. I can tell you there's not a district in the state of Idaho with 10,000 students that holds anywhere close to that. Probably the closest would be Lake Pend Oreille School District holds a fairly large fund balance. So they're about a third of our size. You see oftentimes very small districts, they're holding 100%, but they're $1 million districts. And so they may have $1 million in reserves. But in big districts, we're probably on the light side of the big districts, but there's probably none over 8, 9, 10%. And I think even transferring this money, it puts us a much higher percentage than we were before, right? And you're still talking 8.5%. So it's higher, and it's one we may want to look at policy at some point. If it's going to be that much higher, maybe we adjust our policy. I think by law we're only required to have 3%. Is it 5? I thought our local policy did 5. Yeah, I think it's our local policy says 5, but I think by law it's 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the state requirement is 3.
Oh, okay. I thought 5%
But
was
maybe
ours.
Well, 5 is ours.
Well, I know,
but that's
yeah,
in
I
our
thought the
policy,
state
but
that.
I think we're above what the state says.
And then 16 is the max until it's time to look at one-time investments. And that's local policy, of course. And then the auditors have given their blessing on this as well. So just to let you know, nothing was asked until before the auditors.
All right, so I think the question would be, is there a motion for the resolution? And the resolution is, or any additional questions did you have?
I have a question just on the resolution itself. So that's our next agenda item, I think. That's Resolution 22-23-004. At the end of it, on page 2, it says, "Be it further resolved that such funds cannot be used for any purpose other than directed above unless board adopts a successor resolution to revise or remove the constraints." And I'm just wondering in there, based on the questions we heard, how do we make this where funds spent out of this would have to come to the board for approval? And I know it's anything over 50,000, but theoretically you could 50,000 it till it was gone. Right. Right. And I'm not saying that could happen, but it would happen, but it could, theoretically it could happen. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to tweak that something that the disbursement of this fund would require board approval?
I mean, that's even a couple dollar, yeah, well, I would say we probably won't do anything without contracts for this fund. It really ties our hands. You do approve all expenditures in the form of either prior approval or ratification. I would say we leave the resolution the same, but we make the commitment to bring everything to the board prior and have it not written. We could do reports when we start planning these facilities. Just really ties our hands when, you have maybe consulting fees for less than maybe for a couple thousand, or for legal fees in prepping for some projects and stuff. Even like doing newspaper, like bid notifications in the newspaper, that really ties our hands with timeliness of getting projects out.
Fair enough. What about if we asked, because I think this would be along the same lines, that in approving this resolution that we direct administration to create a budget for the use of these funds and present it back to the board in, 90
How about
days.
I include it in our monthly financials? I add this fund to it.
As a separate item.
You want a separate, not just part of the monthly financials. So I present the general fund and these funds, and then have a summary of kind of planned projects with their budget, and then updates on actuals for those projects as they go along.
The last thing I want to do is tie your hands to get the work going. But I think as we look ahead to future SPFLs and our deferred maintenance needs, which will not entirely go away with this money, I think the more clarity along the way for projects like this, I think will help speak to the community that we heard. Just the
I
continued
agree.
desire
More transparency is the better. And there's going to be a lot of discussion, especially with Jeff in long range planning and Seth with safety and security, how we are going to budget these funds. So there's going to be a lot of teamwork in it.
And I know you're being transparent. I think the easier it is to access that to those that are looking specifically for that, that's what makes it helpful. And that's what makes it feel transparent. Even though you are being transparent and those information's there, being able to say this is where that went. Dr. Hawker, is that tracking with your thoughts as well? Or, I mean...
Yeah, I'm obviously just
processing.
Thinking about some things as well, and really relying on Shannon on the finance end of things, as she mentioned. I mean, it can get complicated. We don't want that, because we want to be able to share out, with our community, the things that we are going to be able to do. And today, there's a big, large list of things that we need to do. And so we're now that we're able to make this transfer, I think that gives us an avenue to say, okay, we have some dollars out of millions and millions of dollars of things that we need to do. Now let's get to work and prioritize all that. And certainly I think we can include that in some reports to the board periodically. I don't have any plans to spend that tomorrow, so it's not like there's a rush here. However, we do know we have some immediate needs on some things that we would like to place a higher priority, but we need to do that. We were really waiting for today's meeting to conclude. So I think the more we can keep business as usual, the better, but also make sure that we're being very transparent as we're continuing to always try to be.
I guess the way I look at it is we've budgeted this year ESSER dollars towards some projects. For example, the CHS 700 building HVAC at around $2 million. That's in design now. I think hoping to go to bid after Christmas, and that work would start spring or summer. In knowing how we operate and bid timelines and design all those sorts of things, this money we set aside, unless you're spending it to replace cameras and door locks and those sorts of things, it's further out than this summer. It's next year, I would say. It would be my guess. So it would still be my preference that you come back with a budget for us and say, okay, here's how we see, or here's some potential areas we could address. We could do it all on deferred maintenance. We have all these heaters going out and these ACs and this roof's leaking and those sorts of things. Or we could, do some security, some
I think we can do that.
maintenance.
I think we can do. I see.
Do that in a few months.
I see
That
Seth
comes
coming
back
up
to us, and then the board can look at it and say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's see what the community thinks. I mean, because we are going to have to plan.
Yes,
The
I think that's.
the SPFL didn't.
I think we
pass.
can
We're
do
gonna have to
that,
make
and
some
I also
plans.
think, and Seth can attest to this as well. Even with some things that I place a pretty high priority on, with updates like cameras and things, there's not an immediate turnaround on those. There's a backlog everywhere, and so I don't believe anything's going to get. We're not able to get anything done right away, but we'll be able to work that budget through and present that to you. Seth, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that's exactly our plan, is to put together a list of projects. We know that we have a lot of different projects, whether it's deferred maintenance or safety and security. We have too many, and so now we're trying to narrow down what are our highest priority needs that we can use both this budget for as well as our ESSER funds for. And really the way we're looking at this is year one, right? With the SPFL, that would have been 10 years of projects we would have been doing. Now we're going to have to narrow it down to just what can we do in 1 year with both these funds that you're talking about as well as the ESSER funds. And so Jeff Fuller and I will work together with Dr. Hawker. We'll prioritize that list, and then we'll come back to you and say, here's what we think we can do with the funds that we have right now. These are the highest priority needs. I know that, HVAC systems are failing. We had one fail on the first day of school at Fernan. So that might be one that we take a look at that raises up the list to be prioritized with these funds. But we will come back to you with a plan. We just have to narrow down, all the different needs that are out there with the funding that we have now. So
Would 90 days be sufficient time to come back with a plan?
I'm getting thumbs
up from Seth.
Seth.
Yes, and Jeff.
And Jeff.
Thank you. Trustee Morris, are you?
I'm going to make a motion if we're done discussing. So I would make a motion to approve Resolution 22-23-004, the transfer and commitment of funds, and request that administration create a budget for the use of those funds and present to the board within 90 days.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Motion passes. Thank you, and thank you, Shannon, for helping us understand all of that. So, great. We have our second reading then for policy 1420, which is expenses for board members. No public comments were submitted on this policy. This is for the board expenses. Any questions about this policy, or is there a motion then?
Sure, because I see the light at the end of the tunnel here on tonight's meeting. I'm going to make a motion to approve policy 1420 as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Dr. Hawker, do you want to present this? Or?
Yeah, I'll just share out that we do plan to present policy 5750, which would allow you to hire a retired former Percy collector. Right now, the law only allows us to do that through June of 2026, I believe, June 30th of 2026. That may get changed in legislation. They all know that, but for right now, at least that'd open the door to hire a few folks that might qualify for the next few years. So we'll this is a recommended policy, and we plan to bring that back.
Great. Thanks. Any questions? Okay. that'll go out then and come back to us again. We have upcoming dates to remember. Next Monday, on the 19th, we have our board workshop here at Midtown, and then our next regular board meeting is on October 3rd, and then another board workshop on October 17th. We are trying to figure out dates then as well to come back together to do superintendent goals and board goals as well for the year. So trying to find a date that works for all of us to come together to do that. So, yeah. Anything else? Hearing none, I think we are done and finished. All right, meeting adjourned.